All right, today we're diving into something pretty unique, a kind of legal analysis of Jesus' claims. But here's the twist. It's not about theology or what came later. It's about judging those claims using the actual laws from his time.
So let's really unpack that. This single question is the entire foundation for what we're about to explore. It's like a thought experiment, right? We're being asked to basically become time travelers, to put ourselves in the shoes of someone in the first century and look at everything that's recorded in the Gospels through their eyes, using only the rule book they had.
And if you're going to do that, you need a single, consistent standard to judge things by. In this case, that standard is the Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh. You have to remember, back then, this wasn't just a holy book. For all intents and purposes, it was the law, the final word on everything. So just to be clear, what are we talking about when we say Tanakh? Well, it's the complete Hebrew Bible. It's made up of 3 parts, the Torah, which is the law, the Naviim, the prophets, and the Ketuvim, the writings. For this whole analysis, think of this as our legal code. This is the whole shebang. Okay, so we've got our law book, the Tanakh. Before we jump into any specific claims or charges, we have to establish the ground rules. What are the core, non-negotiable principles of this law? Specifically, what does it say about who holds divine authority? And this right here, this is basically the bedrock of the whole argument. The source we're looking at boils it down to 3 key areas where the law says God and only God has exclusive jurisdiction. We're talking about who you worship, who can forgive sins, and who answers prayers. According to this legal framework, if anyone else claims those powers for themselves, well, that's a major, major problem. All right, so with that legal foundation set, now we can move on to the evidence phase. The source brings forward 3 central charges. And here's the crucial part. They're all based on Jesus' own words and actions as they're written down in the Gospels. Charge number 1 is all about forgiving sins. The analysis zooms in on this really famous scene from the Gospel of Mark. You know the one, where Jesus is with a paralyzed man. And what he says is key. He doesn't say, God has forgiven you. He says, basically, I have the authority to forgive you. It's a direct claim of personal power. And this is where you can see the conflict laid out so clearly. You've got Jesus' claim on one side, this idea that the Son of the human has this authority, and then you put it right next to the Tanakh, where God himself, speaking through the prophet Isaiah, says, Me, I'm the one who wipes away your wrongdoings. It's a direct clash of who holds that power. Okay, moving on to the second charge, which has to do with prayer. The source points us to this passage in the Gospel of John. And a language is so specific here. He doesn't say, ask in my name and God will answer. The promise is way more direct. It's, if you ask, I will do it. I will act. See the difference? And boom, right there, we have what the analysis calls another direct legal collision. The Psalms are crystal clear. God alone is the responsive hearer of appeal. So when Jesus says, I will act, the argument is that he's stepping into a role that the Tanakh says belongs exclusively to God. All right, the third and final charge is a little different. The source labels it worship innovation. What does that mean? Basically, it's the idea of creating a new rule, a new mandatory step for how you get to God, a step that just wasn't there in the original law. And this is a really crucial point in the argument. The source is saying this isn't just some new teaching, it's a fundamental change to the entire structure of worship. I mean, think about it. You've got these major figures like Abraham, Moses, David, they all prayed directly to God. This idea that you have to go through a specific person, an intermediary, well, the analysis argues that this had absolutely no precedent. It changes the whole relationship defined by the law. So all of this, it's all building toward what the source calls the ultimate legal litmus test. It's a test for any prophet and their new teachings, and it's laid out plain as day, right in the Torah. Yeah, if you look in the book of Deuteronomy, it lays out this very specific 4-step process. Step 1, a prophet shows up. Step 2, they do some kind of amazing sign or miracle. Step 3, the miracle actually comes true. But then, and this is the absolute key, step 4, they use that amazing miracle to tell people, hey, let's worship in a new way, or let's follow these other forces. And here's the kicker, the part that turns everything on its head. According to this law, the miracle itself doesn't prove the new teaching is correct. Not at all. In fact, the miracle is the test. The whole point is to see if the people will stay loyal to the laws they already have, the ones about God alone forgiving sins, answering prayers, and receiving worship, or if they'll be dazzled by the miracle and follow the new teaching. Now, of course, any good legal argument has to anticipate the other side's points, right? And this analysis does exactly that. It looks at some of the common counterarguments and offers rebuttals. And again, every rebuttal is based strictly on the text of the Tanakh.
So let's tackle the biggest one first. What about the miracles themselves? I mean, back to that story of the paralyzed man. Jesus literally says he's healing him to prove he has authority to forgive sins. Case closed, right? How can you argue with that?
Well, the source goes right back to the law for the answer. And it argues that a miracle connected to a new teaching isn't proof, it's the exact trap that Deuteronomy warns everyone about. The power behind the miracle might be totally real, but the law frames it as a test of loyalty. Are you going to follow the amazing new thing, or are you going to stick with the original commandments you were given?
Okay, what about another defense? You hear this one a lot. The idea of progressive revelation. Maybe this isn't a contradiction. Maybe God was just updating things, adding a new, deeper layer of truth for a new era. But from a purely legal standpoint, the analysis says, nope, that doesn't work. It argues this isn't progression, it's a contradiction. And why? Because the Torah itself has a clause that says you cannot add to or subtract from these laws. So changing a fundamental rule, like who gets to forgive sin, isn't seen as an update. From this perspective, it's seen as a violation. So when you put it all together, the charges, the evidence from the Gospels, and the rebuttals to the counterarguments, where does this analysis end up? Well, according to the source, the final verdict is pretty stark. It concludes that this isn't just one or two isolated incidents, but a consistent, systematic pattern of claims that violate the most foundational laws of the Torah about idolatry and false prophecy. And the whole analysis lands on this incredibly powerful and pretty shocking comparison. It doesn't frame Jesus in divine terms at all. Instead, it uses a historical one, comparing him to a king named Yerovam or Jeroboam. Now, if you know the Tanakh, you know that is a heavy accusation. Jeroboam is basically the poster child for bad kings, the one who led the people away from the law and into unauthorized forms of worship, breaking that core covenant with God. So let's just quickly recap what we've covered in this explainer. We've walked through a really strict, text-based legal argument using only the Tanakh as the standard. It laid out those three exclusive powers of God, presented charges from the Gospels that Jesus claimed those powers, and then used that Deuteronomy test to reframe the whole idea of miracles. And all of this leaves us with one final, really thought-provoking question to chew on. What happens when we judge any historical figure not by what was written about them centuries later, but solely by the original text of the law they actually lived under? What might we learn, and what challenges might that create?